Hello, my name is Alon Schwartzman. Thank you for joining me. Today I will be presenting a short presentation, and I hope you can see this. Let's see if I can just minimize the window. I apologize, this is a little bit lo-fi. Just am in a bit of a hurry here, so I haven't had time to put everything together for maximal technological ease. The Wonder of Language and How It Shapes Our World, a case study of the Pirahã language and culture and its significance for teaching English as a second language. And if you take a look above, you see in this photo, these are the Pirahã people. All right. See, I know that there's a better way of doing this and keeping my face here up on the screen, but just bear with me as I do it this very lo-fi way. So if you take a look here at the above photo, this is a picture of the country of Brazil, located on the continent of South America, the Amazon rainforest. I've actually been there, and I can attest to it looking quite a bit like this. This man, he is one of the tribe members, and he is sitting on a canoe going down a tributary, and here below you see some vegetation and the river. So who are the people? The Pirahã. Well, they're an indigenous people that live in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil. Very interestingly, and this is key to what we will learn about their language in a moment and how that bears on our being English teachers or teaching English as a second language. So their culture, according to their own reportage to researchers, is one that recognizes only events and objects that appear within the bounds of that experience, which is both immediate and personal, and therefore has no history other than direct contemporary transpirings within a single generation. They are a group that holds as one of its highest social values the practice of not telling others what to do. So there's a taboo on coercion of others. And the tribe operates without official leaders and with no known social hierarchy. Now, just a quick note, in Israel as Jews, and not just Jews, but those of us who are Jewish, but this is also true of other faiths in Israel and abroad. Um, but I would say, well, I'm talking about Judaism right now, okay? So just let me do so. um, no need to be completely PC all the time. So we as Jews, we find that we live spans of thousands of years in a single moment. That is to say that we're very conversant, transversant between multiple ages within our consciousness. That is to say that while I am here in this hour, it's as if I personally know Moshe Rabbeinu, or Avraham Avinu, or um, Dvorah or Leah or Hel. I mean, the list goes on and on. I feel like I know them. Rabbi Akiva. I've, you know, we are conversant with multiple eras, multiple centuries and millennia, and it's part of our daily consciousness in prayers, in speech, in thought. For the Pira'ah, it's a completely different story of daily perceptuality. They believe, or they deal with, they simply, what's the word? Metafkedi. Uh, Here I go again with language. Sorry. What is meta? They are. See, look at this. This will become important actually in a little while. My difficulty in grabbing the word. I'm feeling around in the dark for the word. Uh, well, why can't I think? They are processually able. I don't know why I'm having such trouble thinking of the word. Uh, they're only processually able to to they're only prepared to deal with direct contemporary things that happen in immediacy before them. And I think it's primarily by choice. I'm not saying that they are limited as primitive people, and that's why they go according to direct contemporary uh, transpirings. I think it's a choice, but a choice that has been ossified over time into an untrespassable culture. So it's at this point, it even though it originally was a choice and still technically is, it doesn't seem like it to them. I think that to them it seems like an undeniable, incontestable, monolithic reality. So it is for most people in the world according to their own culture. People often forget just how much their culture, it seems like a monolith. It seems like something that is natural and has always been here, but actually it's something that's always changing, and much of it is very arbitrary. If you sort of just wipe it all away, you're left with the bare aspects of human reality. So they are, well, let's move on. I don't want to get too much into the philosophical aspect here, although I feel it is quite important for the current matter because they're such an extreme example of Sapir-Whorf considerations, and we'll get into what Sapir-Whorf is in a moment. So the people, they have a very simple kinship paradigm. So they have basically five main words for family relations, familial relations. They have pihi, which is any kind of child. They have hoagi, which is son. Kai, which is daughter. Aigi, which means sibling. And they have bai, elder, parent, grandparent, etc. Just a quick note, the I with the accent mark, that means that's a special tone, and the X, that means that is a glottal stop, like aleph in Hebrew. So, or in English, if you say uh-oh, that sound where you catch your breath between the and the o, that's a glottal stop. So that's written with an X when you're writing Pirahã in Latin characters. And family relations are scarcely tracked any further than those kinship terms. Absolutely mind boggling. In Hebrew, and especially biblical Hebrew, we have and had quite a number of different kinship terms, and some languages and cultures have even more broad and highly developed kinship paradigms with all kinds of little tiny subtle uh, um, nuances so you have like it could be a different word for your uncle on your mother's side from the uncle on your father's side, and there might be different words for your first uncle, your second uncle, your third uncle, not to mention all kinds of different words for various types of cousins. And we have, things like that in English. You can say, he's my second cousin 3 times removed. We can say it that way. But in some languages, they have specific terms for all of these different relations, specific discrete words. So, among the Pira'an, very, very simple, and even it's to us it's rather strange. I mean, you call your mother and father by mom and dad or abba ve'ima, and here it's the same word, bai. but it's also the word that would be used for grandfather or elder or uncle or aunt. And but they don't think of it as grandpa or grandma or mom or dad or any of that. For them, they only think of bait, and that's it. It's you can't really quite imagine unless you're a Pirahã person. Uh, it's mind-boggling. Like you try to imagine, and that's what I want you to do as you're watching this. Try to imagine. Try to put yourself in their shoes. How would your perception of reality change if you had a vocabulary like this? Only 5 words for your familial relations. Imagine your own family now. Imagine having to use only these 5 terms to describe or talk about your relatives. It would be totally different than from how you would describe them now. My sister and I went to the store yesterday. My cousin and I were talking on the phone. My grandmother came over for dinner. My uncle is coming over in his new car. Imagine saying that in Pirahã, but it would be they wouldn't think of it as all these things like uncles and to them it would just be these very broad terms. It's truly a different way of looking at reality. So they are a tribal unit. They have simple huts, a few basic cooking implements and machetes. They manufacture small items like scrapers and arrows. Like many hunter gatherer groups, they sleep for only a quarter of an hour to 2 hours throughout the day and night. And they also do not hold chastity as a normative value, unlike in Judaism. Okay, and sorry. Now, the Pira'ã were taught by a master carpenter to build the canoes that they use every day, which they normally receive from other local peoples. But upon needing a new canoe, they said, Pira'ã do not make canoes. Now, they were not saying, mind you, that the Pira'ã do not know how to make canoes. They weren't saying that we don't want to make canoes. They weren't saying we don't need to make canoes. They were saying that according to their monolithic reality, according to their cosmology, I dare say, the Pira'ã do not make canoes. It is not within their design. So this is very different, truly very different than if you or I were to say, I do not make canoes. It, it would be a true statement, probably. I mean, I doubt that either one of us are canoe makers. I know that I am not. But, it's like we could be, we could learn to be. We might say, well, what does it really mean if I say I don't make canoes? But for them, it was a statement of what's the word of like experiential reality. According to their total worldview, Pira'ã do not make canoes. It is part of the makeup of the universe. In the same way that you and I might say that water is made of hydrogen and oxygen, for them, Pira'ã do not make canoes. It is a natural law. Drawing is outside the Pira'a's realm of traditional knowledge, and when they are asked to draw trees, people, or animals, they produce only simple lines. Uh, this is probably a result of not learning to draw as children during the critical period. Certainly, if you took a Pira'a child and taught him to draw, or allowed him to draw, he would be a decent drawer as an adult. It's simply that they missed the window. That's what I speculate. The Pira'a do not have a concept of a great deity. When they were presented with the idea of the Christian God qua son, they quickly grew disinterested when they learned that the researchers had never actually seen the spirit person in question. So, Yeah, I dare say, I hope I'm not offending anybody, but when they discussed Yushka, they basically said, well, we can't imagine such a character, this spirit person, he's not in front of us, we can't see him, so according to our evidence-based culture, worldview, we cannot accept it as a real thing. So, needless to say, they were not converted. Anytime that a statement is made, the Pirahã require direct experience based evidence. The Pirahã believe in spirits. Now, this seems like an oxymoron. All I've said this whole time is that they only believe in what is immediately before them and what, is concrete. But here I'm saying that they believe in spirits. But this is an important caveat. These spirits might be flora, fauna, and people in their jungle environment. However, these spirits take the form of standard tangible objects only that can be detected by the five senses. So for them, spirits are not disembodied souls or ghosts or spiritual beings off in the distance. These are in fact like an animal or a tree that is physically in front of you. This constitutes a spirit. But once they're gone, from being in front of you, they're not really it doesn't have that power of being a spirit anymore. So it's a very immediate way of looking at reality. It doesn't mean that they're incapable of looking at reality in any other way. This is just their culture determines how they deal with reality. If you were to school them in the ways of the Western world, they would be very much like us. But this is the way that they are within their own world. So now to the language of the Pirahã. They are claimed by some researchers to have no relative clauses or grammatical recursion. And if the latter is true, it could challenge the theory that recursion occurs in all human languages. We'll get to that momentarily. Uh, it's believed that the Pirahã is language is among the language with the least number of phonemes. Some say as few as 8, but generally it's estimated 9 to 12 different phonemes only. Whereas depending on what dialect, English has over 40. It depends on the dialect, but so that is to say that we have a certain number of letters in our alphabet, but we have far more phonemes than we have letters in our alphabet. So here among the Pirahã, we're talking about something like between 8 and 12. Um, it says 9, but yeah, it's kind of a contentious issue in the linguistic world. Uh, So you can read a little bit more about this if you're curious. It does depend on whether a woman is speaking, because women are more phonemically conservative within their culture. Just like in Hebrew, we have, your gender or sex can determine how you conjugate certain verbs and so forth, adjectives. Um, but for them, it's not that. It's actually the actual phonemes themselves are chosen according to if you're a man or a woman. Um, so they're very small vowel inventory, very small consonant inventory. They do have special tones that have phonemic value. So that is if you have a phoneme like ah, if I say ah, 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 these are different tones for the same phoneme, but in Pira'ah, depending on the tone you use, it can have a totally different meaning, just like in Mandarin Chinese, or at least similarly. They also have two sounds that are completely unknown in any other language in the world, one of which sounds like blowing a raspberry, and that's like or something like that. Uh, but it's not used very commonly, and they use it even less now because they see how foreigners react to it. So that's a case where, the language is being influenced by how they perceive outsiders perceiving them. Okay, so that's something that worries me. I feel bad about that. But anyway, the language is characterized by an intricate system of vowel lengths, stresses, and tones. And amazingly, it can be the language can be whistled, hummed, or sung, serving as a vehicle of complete everyday communication. So it's not merely that they're sort of singing the general intonations of their language, they are literally singing or humming whole conversations where the notes of the song double as words, like actual words. So it's very amazing. It is a language with a very complex structure. So they have special morphemes which notate if the subject or object is nearby or distant to the speaker, if something is desired, if a reported event was actually witnessed firsthand or was only heard about from another person, if the speaker is certain that the event actually happened or not, and many other aspectual markers. However, despite the complexity of this aspectuality, Pirahã does not have any markers for gender, number, person, or tense. Wow. So, of course, in Hebrew, we have a lot of markers for gender, number, person, and tense. Um, Now, when I talk about, marking if something is desired or reporting an event that was witnessed firsthand or not, we can talk about those things in any language, but normally you would use what's called circumlocution. You would come up with whole phrases. You would say, "Oh, I didn't see that myself. I'm just saying what I think happened." That's already a whole sentence that I had to say to get that point across. Within Pira'ah, it's a single morpheme. It's like one or two syllables that you attach to the rest of the sentence that means the exact same thing as something like, "Oh, I didn't see this myself, but this is what I believe happened according to the secondhand evidence." That's it's really amazing. Many languages um, outside of the sort of modern world have features like that. Okay, and just a few more notes about the language. They lack or the language lacks any ordinal or cardinal numbers, so no number words. That is, they only have hoi, or sorry, it's hoi. No, sorry, it's this uh, hoi and hoi, and they are minimal pairs distinguished only by tone. So one means a small amount, the other means a large amount. And they are believed to have a cultural aversion to counting. They have a notion that their way of life is perfect and does not require modification by outside influences. So it's not that they don't know they're not able to count, or that is to say, it's not that they don't have the capacity. It's simply that either they don't want to, or their culture is so distant from having any sort of need to do that that they don't do it. The other possibility, which I tend to lean towards, is that because they did not learn counting as children in that critical period, just like learning language, it's very difficult for them to learn arithmetic as adults. That's what I believe is actually happening there. And the researchers were trying to teach them how to count up to 10, and they didn't get past being able to count something like two. So it's very interesting. Believed to have no special color words, only light and dark. Uh, it's suspected that they had no pronouns like I, you, he, she, it originally, and that all the pronouns were actually borrowed from other languages nearby in the rainforest. If this is true, which some researchers contest, it would be amazing to imagine a language without pronouns. In English, we use pronouns all the time, with a few exceptions. You can say not interested, and you don't have to say the I, as in I am not interested. You just say not interested. In Hebrew, you can drop pronouns a lot more than in English, but still not the whole way. In Japanese and Chinese, you can drop pronouns the whole way through, and all you need is the verb much of the time, if you can imagine such a thing. Uh, and it's understood through context. So I used to live in China. The way you say "I love you" in the full way is "我爱你," and that means I love you. But you can frequently do away with the I, so you take away the 我, and you just say 爱你, and that means love you. In English, we can say that. In Hebrew, we can say that. You sometimes drop it. But in Chinese and Japanese, you can just say 愛, which means love. And it could mean I love you, you love me. It could mean all kinds of different things based on context, but you only need that one word, and that's the entire, it's an actual legal sentence within their language. So that gives you an idea of what a pronoun-less language might be like, which is what it's believed that Pirahã once was a pronoun-less language by some of the researchers. Anyway, it's an amazing thing to imagine. Certain constructions are completely impossible, like the big happy friendly brown dog, a little bit strange in English, but still possible. This phrase would have to be rendered as the dog is brown, it is friendly, it is happy, it is big. Likewise, embedded in recursive content such as the cat's owner's hut is an illegal structure in the Pirahã language. It would have to be rendered quasi-paratactically as there is a cat, it has an owner, that is his hut. So it suggests that sentences in Pirahã have a limit on length, and that there is a finite number of possible phrases in sentences on any given set of vocabulary items. Furthermore, language sentences like Bob says that Samantha thinks that Toby has left the camp are also illicit. It would have to be deconstructed into smaller utterances to get the same point across. Really quite fascinating. It means that if what they're saying is true, there's no recursion, which it's an unthinkable thing linguistically. Why? Well, let's take a look. Everett, one of the main researchers into the Pirahã language, controversially posits that it is in fact true that the language actually lacks recursion, what we were just looking at. This would challenge the foundations of Chomskyan linguistics, which holds recursion as a basic principle of all language. Chomsky and others fiercely contest this claim, saying that even if Pirahã lacks recursion, this would not falsify their theory of language. It's complicated as to why they contest this. This is a big thing in linguistics. This is very contentious. People get, they say them as fighting words. People could actually throw punches over this in the linguistic community. I'll not get into that, but just to give you an idea of how contentious and fascinating this particular sphere of linguistics is. The Pirahã do not. It's an exonym. That is to say that they don't call themselves Pirahã. The Pirahã actually use the endonym. This is what they call themselves, hiite, which means the straight ones. The term for speakers of other languages like us is crooked head. So you and I are crooked head, and they are the straight ones. Very nice. I've had worse things said about me. The Pirahã whistle rather than speak their language during hunting expeditions. We kind of got into that before. Okay. And just to sort of finish up with this part very quickly, According to Everett, there are interrelated pairs of perceptual correlations between the language and the culture. So Pirahã has very few kinship terms, and the Pirahã's actual concept of kinship reflects this terminological paucity. The apparent nature of the Pirahã language and culture, where directness, simplicity, and absolute matter of factness are key characterizations, suggests that the Pirahã have a cultural propensity for the deliberate eschewing or rejection of what they consider to be extraneous excess. These points lead us into the territory of the superior worth hypothesis and linguistic relativity hypothesis, which is basically the question of, does culture, thought, uh, Weltanschauung, worldview, perception, do these things determine or at least influence in a major way language? Well, actually, it's vice versa. Does it's both, but it's more along the lines of, does language determine perception and uh, thought and so forth? But it's both. It's does language influence or determine thought, perception, culture, or vice versa? Well, I believe that it's actually both in a continuous feedback loop, and we'll get to that quickly before we end everything here. I promise I won't take too much more of your precious time. Uh, so now that we have learned some characteristics of both the Pirahã language and culture or people, we can immediately see that their anthropological profile, rejecting the unseen world and what is not immediately perceivable, requiring second party experiential evidence of any claim, marking this linguistically and according it mandatory cultural practice, having a faith or spiritual system limited to almost entirely present tangible things that are immediately in front of them, extremely concise kinship uh, paradigm favoring a leaderist tribal organization without hierarchy and treating coitus without great taboo, it mirrors the way that their language works, which largely encodes linguistically the very things that they practice and believe as a culture. So it's really, could this mean that their language helps determine their culture or anthropological profile, their perceptions, their thought, or perhaps vice versa? Perhaps both. Perhaps both spheres are locked in a perpetual feedback loop, like I said, such that the language reinforces the culture and the culture reinforces the language. But this is true also of thought and perception as well. Okay, so what can we learn? What can we take from all this as educators? This is Jaime Escalante, great educator, and this is Tomlinson below, also a great one. Here's a rabbi with his pupil, or father and son, teaching in a Jewish context. What can we learn from the extreme case of Pira'an? Or rather, I'm sorry, we can learn from the extreme case of Pira'an just how distinct culture and language can be from our own. This is really important to understand as English teachers teaching Hebrew speakers, Amharic speakers, Tigray, Tigrinya, Russian, Chinese, Tagalog speakers how to speak English. We have to understand that they're coming from a completely different reality that, if not determined by language, is at least highly influenced by it. We can see that while it's a popular sorry pop this is actually, you can read this part if you want. This is actually not that you can read through this if you like. It's not so important at the moment. We should realize that the native Hebrew speakers are learning English as a second language, or third or fourth or fifth language. uh, it's much more of a subtle process than we may imagine, even if we're fluent in Hebrew ourselves. Our students are not merely learning a new language, they are in fact learning a new way of seeing reality, of arranging thoughts, of ordering priorities, of naming the very elements of one's very perception through speech and expression, like Adam in the Garden of Eden. In this sense, learners of language, both of first and second languages, are all atoms, naming the pieces of our world. So even though, well, yeah, that's another thing you can read by yourself. Not so important. We would feel, yeah, yeah. Basically, everything here is along the lines of what I've already said. But I would add that this lesson is especially true when we're teaching and interacting with special needs children and differently abled adults. Language, even in the most basic of levels, can open entirely new and unforeseen universes for a person for whom there was previously no or there were few horizons. Famous cases include Helen Keller, Jeannie, and many others. Now let's take a look very quickly, and this is important to the general moral of the story here. Here we have Helen Keller, and this is her teacher, Anne Sullivan. Helen Keller, for example, she was blind, deaf, and mute since a very early age, but with the help of Anne Sullivan and some others, she went on to master language, eventually authoring a number of acclaimed books. That is, that Anne Sullivan taught her a special tactile form of sign language where she would sign letters into the palm of her hand. Very excruciating process to break through the darkness because you can imagine in a very literal way Helen Keller being both blind and deaf and mute. She was feeling around in the darkness. All she could perceive was what she could feel tactilely, what she could smell and taste. I mean, it's a and maybe just have a sixth sense, kind of there could be something like that as well. But it's a very different from what we have, having sight and being able to hear and being able to talk. Uh, so it was a true breakthrough. Anne Sullivan brought the light into her darkness. And not merely did she learn to speak, to communicate, but she wrote books. I mean, I could cry from talking about such a thing. It's an amazing, amazing thing. Now, Jeannie, this girl below, this is a sort of a different thing. She was a so-called feral child, a victim of severe and extended domestic neglect, I believe in the 70s, back in Los Angeles, maybe. She she was only able to learn rudimentary language after she was saved from her severe abuse in which she grew up. Uh, so she basically passed that critical period alone, locked up, between birth and 5 6, where you start to learn, you internalize the rules, or the intuitive rules of arithmetic, of language, of all these things, that if you try to learn them later, if you never had any exposure to them as children, you can, as human beings, we're capable of getting it a little bit as adults, but you'll never master language, unfortunately, it would seem. So, but at the same time, Jeannie, though she didn't master syntax or anything like that, she at least had some language, and it opened her horizons inestimably from having no way to communicate at all, other than like grunts or gestures as an animal would do, even though many animals have pretty profound communication systems. But we'll not get into that. But she 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 was able to use language probably similar to Coco the gorilla, if you look, I won't get into that either, but you can look that up if you're interested. It's basic language. Syntax is limited. Some claim it's not syntax at all. That's a difficult question, but very, very rudimentary. But nonetheless, it brought rays of light into what otherwise was a dark box. Uh, so we need to discover as educators that even though it may not be such a profound, gaping difference between us as English speakers and them as non-English speakers, the gulf is still profound. It is still extreme, much more than we may realize. We are bridging a gap between two different worlds. So keep that in mind as we get to the next small activity, and then we will end this already long, already way too long presentation. So here I have, oh, you can't see it, hold on. Here I have a so-called Pandora's box. Now, I brought this into class in the original presentation I did, and it says, the word language in various languages here, and the idea is to close your eyes and feel around, and there are about 6 different objects inside, and you have to guess just by using your tactile sensations, by just feeling with your fingers what the object is. For example, I can feel a cube. It feels like a cube. Is this a cube? Yes, yes. All right. And then let's try one more thing. I feel something kind of metallic, like it has a toothy end to it. It is a wrench. So you get the idea. This is an amazing tool, I think. So just imagine that you were here with me right now and that you had done this activity. The idea is that you close your eyes, you put your hand inside, and you feel around, just using your fingers to try to figure out what it is that is there. And then you have to try to put a word to the thing that you're feeling. But what in the world does this have to do with Pirahã and teaching English as a second language? Well, let me tell you. So like I said, imagine that you had done this activity where you're closing your eyes, you're feeling around the dark, you're trying to put a word, any word, to that thing that you're feeling. It's kind of hard because, there's like a disconnect between what you're feeling with your fingers and actually putting a name to the thing that you're touching. Was it hard feeling around in the dark? Compare Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan's breakthrough. They truly, or I should say, Helen Keller was really feeling around in the dark, like the box. Not only to lay your hand on some object, any object, in the dark recesses of this box, but then on top of that, to put a word to what you were actually feeling there. Well, my dear friends, this is what learning a new language is. This is what it is like to feel around a dark box, to put a word to the thing that you're feeling and you can't quite get a hold of. In the extreme case of the Pirahã, learning a contact language like Portuguese, which is the local major language in Brazil, would be extraordinarily difficult due not only to the massive structural differences between the two tongues, but because of the anthropological divide in worldview, which the language itself drives or is driven by, or probably both. Learning English as a second language for our students in Israel is a great big Pandora's box activity. So this here Pandora's box, putting your hand inside of it with your eyes closed, trying to put a name to the thing you're feeling, that is learning English. That is learning any language, not just a second language or a third or fourth or fifth language, but a first language. It is feeling around in the dark, putting a name to the thing that you're feeling. And we need to think of it in that way. Or I propose that we do. You don't have to do anything. And, well, just consider my proposal, is what I'm humbly asking. So try to imagine with your students that you're kind of like feeling around within this dark box, trying to put, or that they are trying to put words to the thing that they're feeling around for. That is to say, an English word. Um, our students, they're feeling around in the dark of their own minds, trying to find the right word for what they are feeling, any word to communicate at all. So let us be keenly aware of this as fellow teachers, that it is our job to break open that Pandora's box as best we can, shedding the light of words and language learning into our students' worlds. It is not only teach that a teacher must do, but communicate to our students that there is a whole world waiting for them outside that box. If only we will break it open and show them. Now, if anybody's familiar with the myth of Pandora's box, they might ask, this is a very strange analog or analogy, because I'm not sure who's Pandora here or the things within Pandora's box. Why would you call this a Pandora's box? Well, it's a little bit unclear even to me, but what I believe is that the Pandora element, that is to say, or rather, no, it's Pandora's box, but the thing within the box, the untold secrets that are about to be unleashed, whether they are good or bad or both, they are revelations in any case. What is that? That in this context, it is the students themselves. That's the thing, that when they're feeling around for the right word, it's an exercise in identity as well, informing yourself as a language speaker, as a speaker of a target language. It is about becoming an English speaker. It is truly an exercise in identity. So now, go, unleash the Pandoras of your pupil unto the world. Thank you very much. My name is Alon Schwartzman. I hope you enjoyed this presentation as much as I did, and I apologize for the length. But have a great day, and please feel free to watch it over again, or to read in greater detail what is available in the text.